بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the second session of the Dubai Smart Forum in collaboration between the Dubai Smart Initiative and Mohammed bin Rashid School of Government. Today, inshallah, this session we are all here to exchange knowledge and information so that we can together collaborate and achieve the goals that His Highness Sheikh Mohammed has set for us. Please help me welcome today Dr. Aisha bin Bishar, who will inshallah open up the session for us. Dr. Aisha.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بالنيابة عن اللجنة التنفيذية لمبادرة دبي الذكية، أرحب بكم في الجلسة الثانية لمنتدى دبي للمدن الذكية بعنوان البيانات المتعددة المصادر، أو كما يطلق عليها باللغة الأجنبية Big Data. اليوم تقود ثروة المعلومات الإبداع في إدارة المدن، مما يؤهل متخذي القرار من الوصول إلى أهدافهم في تحسين جودة الحياة. ومن خلال هذه الجلسات النوعية نطمح في دبي للاستفادة من أفضل الممارسات الدولية في هذا المجال، لنصوغ منهج خاص بنا يوائم طبيعة مدينتنا. لا يخفى على الجميع التحديات اليوم الموجودة أمام المدن في الاستفادة من البيج داتا، إلا أننا في دبي الذكية نراها فرص لنطور ونستفيد من البيج داتا، ومنها تكامل البيانات. فنحن ما زلنا في أولى الخطوات لوضع التشريعات والقوانين الهادفة لإدارة هذه البيانات. كذلك البنى التحتية، اليوم دبي تعتبر من أفضل المدن في تغطيتها بأفضل البنى التحتية، سواء كانت الفايبر أوبتيك وغيرها من البنى التحتية. يمكن اليوم في دبي الذكية نهدف إلى الاستفادة من ترابط هذه البنى التحتية وتكاملها. كذلك نسعى في دبي الذكية لجعل دبي أسعد مدينة في العالم، ومن أهم مهام هذه المبادرة هي تحقيق التميز في جودة الحياة سواء للمقيمين أو الزوار. وفي مجال حديثنا اليوم عن البيانات المتعددة المصادر، لدينا حزمة من المشاريع التي يعمل عليها الفريق، ومنها وضع منصة للتعاون ما بين جميع الأطراف المعنية وذوي الاختصاص لتوفير منصة مركزية آمنة للولوج إلى المعلومات. وكذلك من الحلول المطروحة إنشاء اللوحة الذكية، أو ما يطلق عليه الداشبورد، التي تمكن الفرد من إدارة بياناته الشخصية والبيانات المحيطة من حوله في المدينة. اليوم البيانات المتعددة المصادر البيج داتا ستسهل التعاون بين الجهات المعنية في القطاعين العام والخاص، مما يمكننا ويسهل علينا الوصول إلى رؤيتنا في دبي الذكية. نشكر اليوم IBM لوجودهم معنا في هذه المنصة المعرفية في كلية محمد بن راشد للإدارة الحكومية، للاستفادة من أفضل الممارسات اللي توصلوا لها هم في تطبيقاتهم الموجودة في حول العالم. شكرا وأتمنى لكم الاستفادة.
شكرا دكتور عائشة. Please allow me to introduce the next speaker. In 2001, just as a short introduction, Douglas Lanley, an analyst at Meta Group, which is now known as Gartner, coined this term, big data. He was trying to describe what businesses and companies were starting to do at that time, almost 13 years ago. Companies at that time, they were just dealing with the vast amount of data, gathering data, whether company data or customer data, and trying to utilize it to predict things better. Now, after 13 years, with all the hype around big data, we can say that big data is actually a reality. From airlines trying to decide how much fuel to put in their airplanes, or deciding what's the next best route to open, or retailers trying to decide how much turkey to put on the shelves before the big seasons, or smart cities trying to predict or to optimize their bus routes for the late nights shifts. Big data is the reality. Companies and governments and cities are using big data to predict more things more accurately and to instill a culture of decision-making based on data. To introduce this subject to you and to elaborate on it, it's my pleasure to introduce Mrs. Olga Parra. She is the smarter analytics leader at IBM, Middle East and Africa. She has a vast experience in the subject, over 15 years, in working with organizations in Middle East and Africa on putting the right strategies for business analytics, information management, predictive analytics. Please welcome Mrs. Olga.
Thank you so much for the invitation for today's opportunity. My name is Olga Parra. I believe I have a strong voice, so I may not need to use a microphone. Just to give you a little bit of time to get accustomed to my accent and to introduce the topic. I am Colombian, have lived in Canada for the last 18 years. Been in the data space for 15, more or less, don't make calculations about my age. And last year, IBM assigned me with giving the assignment of the opportunity to lead the Smart Analytics Initiative for IBM. Thank you. The opportunity to lead the Smart Analytics Initiative for the Middle East and Africa. I live in Nairobi. I come from a family that believe in real estate and land as a way of investment. And as I travel around the world and around Africa, Middle East, North America, every time that I land in a city or in a country, I'm start thinking, will this be a good place to invest? Will this be a good place to live? I don't think that I'm unique in those type of questions. No. Business and people around the world, millions, are looking for where to invest, where to move, where to live. And let me look at this. These are the traditional challenges that governments are facing now. Is how do I attract investment? How I keep my citizens happy? How can I anticipate their needs? And they are not unique. Everybody is competing for that type of investment. So we see what is the type of challenges that governments are facing to retain and attract both newcomers or new companies to settle in the country. It's around transparency and accountability. It's about how to address the increasing threats for in safety, both internal and through the borders. Money doesn't grow in trees. How to optimize the economical investment and the budgets. And finally, well, citizens and companies are getting very smart. They really leverage data and leverage mobility to demand better services, right? So we see lots of, or several use cases of how big data is being used in government. And you are familiar with that. You are writing the book on this. It's about managing resources effectively. It's optimizing the decision-making around waste and environment pressures. Build intelligent transportation systems, improve safety, healthcare, and social programs. It's not about them independently. It's how each of them contributes to the other use case to make it better. This is not about silos. No. Governments around the world are doing this in silo. The jump and the innovation comes in doing it in an integrated manner. It's not about all signing for the same technology. It's not about all doing exactly the same thing. It's about how we are going to leverage all the analytics and data coming from the transportation systems for safety, for healthcare, for the environment. So as I go through my presentation, I'm going to challenge yourself to start thinking. It's not about each use case. It's how I'm going to contribute to the use cases of my colleagues, of the other entities in the government. Well, as these use cases evolve, instrumentation also is demanding, and more data is available. And this is why, we believe at IBM that data is the new natural resource. And you are the experts in natural resources, by the way. So you know that in order to get value from a natural resource, it needs to be refined. And refined in the data terms is analytics. It's business analytics. That's what converts a piece of data in an insight that helps me to drive a decision. Now, the other thing that we are observing is that decision-making based on analysis, business intelligence, is moving from the top to everybody and to every process. Because it's not about me being smart, it's about my organization being smarter. It's about my country being smarter. That's going back to the topic. It's not about, the transportation area or the health department. It's about how all get smarter. And when we look at this, the reality is that current systems don't cope up, don't have the capability to address these pressures. They don't. They were built with a mindset of 10, 20, 30 years ago. And the new realities are different. And when I talk about this chart, a memory comes to my mind, and it was the fall of 2004. I was, early in my data career, and I attended the last IBM BI summit. It was in San Francisco. We were what I call, with all due respect, I call 75 cats. Okay. I was the youngest one, and it was in my early 30s. So the vast majority had either no hair or white hair, no tattoos, nothing that, kind of innovative there, but they were kind of the gurus of data. And there was this conference at from one of the IBM consultants, and she, we were 20 perhaps in that session, and she said, well, brace yourself and be blessed, because the data world is in its infancy and you are here. That was 2004. 2005, IBM had the first Information on Demand conference. It was in Vegas, and it was 5,000 people. And since then, we are growing. Well, I'm telling you today, feel blessed and brace yourself. The analytics time is here. And you are here. You are getting, I'm going to say, the glimpse of what is coming. And it's exciting times. There are going to be challenges. There are going to be lots of things to learn. But it's a fantastic opportunity for a city that is always pushing yourself to do better. Forget about the numbers. We all know that it's big. But this is, okay, so believe me, we are here in 2014, and this is what is ahead of us. Are we ready for that? Sorry, I'm Latin and I tend to dance, so I don't have music, so I move a lot. So this is what is ahead of us. Are we ready? How are we preparing for that? This is not to get in panic, but it's, are we thinking and are we putting the right framework in place to leverage that opportunity? And what is the opportunity? Is to stop responding and start anticipating. And I keep, bringing the topic. See, responding is a match of integration. Anticipating is integrated and be ready for what is coming. So that's what innovation is happening. So we're talking about big data. Do you know what is a small data? Someone wants to venture? Okay. So a small data is actually, does anyone wants to guess? A small data is actually the traditional data that we have been used for, 60, 70 years to make decisions. Is that 20% of structured data that we have in databases and that supports our decision process. Big data is that remaining 80% that we are not leveraging in the organization to make decisions. So to give an analogy, we have 5 senses. A small data is going through the world with just one sense and make decisions in our life. Big data is using all our senses to make that decision. For sure we are going to improve, right? We know about the volume, velocity, and variety. From an IBM perspective, we also include the veracity, which means being able to make and leverage data that don't have the right quality or the right completeness. Because from that data, we can infer decisions. But ultimately, it's about the value that we get from big data. We look at this not just from the data aspects, but also how is going that big data component is helping us to make better decisions. And why is important? Why big data is important? And it's a challenge and it's an opportunity. It's because big data is breaking several paradigms that we had in the information management area. And as it's breaking the paradigms, it's breaking also our way of looking at problems and solving those problems. It moves from just taking a small sample of data to make decisions to use all data. In the past, we needed to cleanse the data before we use it for decision making. Now, we use it all, and we identify what is the pieces of data that need to be cleansed. We start with a hypothesis, and we went all the cycle to prove that hypothesis. Now, what we do is we let the data telling us answers to questions we have not asked yet. And I want to pause there. Is to let or allow the data answer questions that we have not asked yet. Because we don't or we didn't have the capability to look at those correlations of transactions and interactions that happened during the last year. This is for cross-border security. We didn't figure it out easily how people move and behave and change. What border did they cross? How much was the luggage weight that they had? What were the activities that they performed? Now we have that capability. And now, big data technologies allow us to run engines and start helping us identifying those patterns. It applies in border security. It applies in healthcare with cancer research. We had, 7 types of cells that we identified as possible cancer cells. Big data allow us to look at all types of patterns in cells and identify 3 more that we didn't know. And we didn't have time to explore. The data told us that. We also needed before to have the data at rest in the data warehouse before doing analytics. Now we do it on fly. Analytics in real time. It also make us change from just reporting, looking at the past, to start predicting. And it's not about just predicting, but knowing what to do about that prediction. Socialize analytics from the elite few to everybody. And when I say the elite few, I'm talking about the access to do analytics just for heavy specialized PhDs to be able for people like us. A regular person that needs sometimes 5 times to hear something in order to understand it. That's me. I can do analytics. 5 years ago, it was kind of like, oh my goodness, I can't. And this is a topic, when I push for innovation, this is the one that I would like you to think about. In the traditional approach, we program analytics. What we have now are systems that learn. This is, when you have heard about Watson, this is what Watson is. It's been able to learn from all the interactions that are happening and not just predict, but also enhance those predictions. And finally, to make analytics not in a scheduled process, in a scheduled manner, but doing it in real time. Most importantly, when we combine all of these paradigms that big data are breaking, the most important one, in summary, is how the information management foundation that we used to have in the organization has changed. See, on one side, we have all types of data, right? It's about the smart cities apps, the caseworker, the social media, sensor, video. And on the other side, you have the value. The business users and the business applications that need to make decisions to fix their problems, to optimize their processes, their results. And in the middle, in the traditional way, we had what? A data warehouse and a reporting system, right? Not anymore. This type of big data elements required a new way of thinking information management frameworks. This is what we need to do. We need to have capabilities that allow us to do real-time data processing, that allow us to do analytics with any type of data regarding of the quality, to do deep analytics for the data that we need to explore in more detail, to have the traditional data warehouse, and all marked for a data integration and a data governance framework. It's not about one solution to fit all. It's not about all of these solutions for every use case. That's why we need to start with the problem. What is what we want to achieve? And then we identify what are the components that need to happen. Because at the business side, they want to understand what is happening, why it's happening, what could happen, and equally important, what should I do? It's not just to go to a fortune teller to tell me, your plane is going to crash. Give me the options of what I can do and act on that. And what do I need, what I'm learning from that process. And this is the push, is systems that learn. Predictive analytics, in my mind, and this is not the IBM point of view, it's Olga Parra point of view. Predictive analytics is actually, I'm going to say, on the top. Systems that learn is what is coming. Systems that learn. Use cases. So I was thinking, where are we doing this? What is happening there? And I want to show you a video. This was Wimbledon last year, and it's about what we can do with big data in just one event. How are we going to leverage all that information to optimize the experience of the people that are attending to that event, but as well all the infrastructure that is necessary to have behind, from a security, emergency, coordination, is a lot. How are we going to leverage big data to deliver that? That's the example that we have in Wimbledon. We also have the traditional examples that you are living now, is being able to predict dropouts, school dropouts in the UK. And we can anticipate that in some cases with 6 months in advance. So, and it's not, again, it's not about predictive, it's what are we going to do with that prediction? Being able to identify smuggling patterns at cross borders in European organizations. Things that we couldn't do before, we are doing it now. And finally, another use case that we had is being able to predict claim fraud in social services. There are many. We have transportation. We have emergency in Rio de Janeiro. My point here is imagination is the limit. How are we going to integrate across different entities to maximize the effort that each of you are doing is the key. Big data, big challenges. Is privacy versus convenience. Do I really want to be followed? As I was talking to someone just recently about big data, my observation is, and my best way of describing this is, it's not about big data, about big things. It's big data about you. How much do I know about you, or an event, or energy, or the way in which I'm consuming water in my building. It's big data about small, critical subjects. And that is what makes it an amazing opportunity, but also an amazing challenge. Security versus freedom. New offers versus harassment. I'm not sure here in Dubai, but in Kenya, I get more or less 10 advertisements from my telco, with offers that I really don't want them to send. They believe that they are anticipating, but they are not. So it's an opportunity for me to talk to them. But anyhow, how much do you want really to anticipate without making me feel that you are harassing me? We have new paradigms to deal with, and I talk about the ones that we are breaking. New skill sets, new approaches to analyze data, and is building a new foundation. Why I mention governance here? Because as we are in the infancy of this, we need to learn of the mistakes that previous IT generation trends created in the organization. How are we going to create the right framework to address these questions? Do we know where the data come from? Is it a good source, bad source? And even if a bad source, we can still use it. How are we going to use it? How can we verify it? Who and how we will verify that the information is going to be used? What is the quality of that information? What is the context in which we are going to be able to use that information to make decisions? Can we measure, quantify, and monetize our efforts? It's not about big data. It's about the outcomes that big data is driving in the government. And just to make my point, this is governance. Did you know that in the Edward Snowden case, it was cache, information left in a cache of a server, hidden server left out there in a very obscure US organization. Do you know where your data resides? Do you know who has access to that data? Data quality. I'm not sure if you know who Bernard Madoff is, but everybody around feels the debacle of 2008. It wasn't all about him, but the data and the indications were there that something fishy was there, but nobody was looking at the patterns and behaviors of transactions that were happening. And it's about the architecture as well. how well architecture at the data systems. In this case, a merge that didn't report the right value of the company forced the CFO of the biggest tourist company in Europe to resign. He was reporting the wrong amount and overvaluating the company. So this is why security and privacy, data quality, and architecture matters. So when you look at your big data initiatives, look at a framework that addresses people, process, and technology in an integrated manner. Again, you don't need to govern all the data. And this is not about standardizing in one system. This is about creating the rules of engagement between organizations of how all of this is going to happen. Now, a question that typically get asked is, why, if I have the same systems and kind of similar level of organization, there are some organizations that excels with analytics and others that don't, right? We know, and we have done studies that demonstrate that companies that use analytics for decision process typically excel 2.4 times more companies that don't. What makes an organization to thrive with analytics? And when I look at this, and I look at the city of Dubai, I'm going to say you almost had it all. You have the sponsorship from His Highness, you have the culture, you have the data, you have the expertise. If not, you are bringing it. Funding is always scarce everywhere, so it's not that it grows. Again, it doesn't grow in trees, so it needs to be optimized. The platform, you are building it. The source of value. So I don't see really a reason to be concerned, but you need to keep pushing the innovation. Typically, how do you start? 3 steps. When I talk about the strategy, I'm not talking about one strategy for the whole organization. Each line of business, each department has its own purpose. What is that? What is that purpose? And drive, understanding of how big data can leverage and optimize that purpose. Architect for the future. And it comes my comment about don't architect just for predictive analytics. Architect it for systems that learn. That is the important piece now. And finally, enable the organization to act. We talk about the partnership between IBM and Apple. And this is not about the public, the people out there. This is about enabling every agent in the government to be able to make optimal decisions leveraging analytics. Make them smarter, because as they become more smarter, services to the citizens and to companies that want to make business here get better, get faster, get more efficient. Now, before I say thank you, I want to show you my last video. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
Technology has helped us go further, go faster, go to the moon, solve problems previous generations couldn't imagine. But can technology think? Watson can. IBM Watson is a technology unlike any that's come before. Because rather than force humans to think like a computer, Watson interacts with humans on human terms. Watson can read and understand natural language, like the tweets, texts, articles, studies, and reports that make up as much as 80% of the data in the world. A simple internet search can't do that. When asked a question, Watson generates a hypothesis and comes up with both a response and a level of confidence. And then Watson shows you the steps it took to get to that response. In a way, Watson is reasoning. You don't program Watson, you work with Watson. And through your interactions with it, it learns, just like we do. Every experience you give it makes it smarter and faster. But in addition to learning, Watson can also teach. A new generation of doctors are helping Watson learn the language of medicine, In turn, Watson is helping teach doctors by providing possible treatment options. Watson is learning the language of finance to help investment advisors recommend the best way to plan for retirement. The IBM Watson Engagement Advisor can react to a caller's questions and help operators find the right answers faster. The IBM Watson Discovery Advisor helps researchers uncover patterns that are hiding in mountains of data and then share these new insights with colleagues. With Watson Analytics, you can ask Watson a question, and Watson can show you what the data means in a way that's easy for anyone to understand and share. The IBM Watson Developers Cloud offers software vendors and developers the technology and tools they need to take advantage of Watson's cognitive power. Accessible on the cloud, anytime. Watson needs you. This generation of problem solvers is going to learn much faster with Watson, and Watson, in turn, will learn much faster with us. Developers will solve new problems. Business leaders will ask bigger questions. And together, we'll do things generations before couldn't dream of. What will you do with Watson?
What would you do with Watson? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Olga. From moving from responding to anticipation to looking at how to start with strategies to what are the challenges around privacy and others from big data, there's quite a lot to talk about and to discuss. For the next session, I would like to moderate the questions and answers, and perhaps initially, if you would come on stage, please.
I'm going to close my computer.
Okay. I have some questions prepared in case, just to get things started, but I would like initially maybe to open the floor for questions.
Like this, no?
Yes?
1, 2, 3. Yes, I think that. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, for if you would like to introduce yourself, then the question, please.
Yes, thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. I'm over here in the back, yeah. My name is Peter Lyons. I'm with the GSM Association. I think that video at the end was very, I think it framed a lot of the discussions in a way that, maybe we can more easily discuss. If we're talking about something like Watson and the analytics and the processing associated with crunching, this vast amounts of data, where do you think that processing and analytics would actually take place? There was reference to this happening on the cloud. Would we require a Watson supercomputer in Dubai? Would there be a need to have, some kind of like distributed computing? How do you see that processing power developing? What are the needs? And then what would be the requirement for connectivity to that in terms of like speed and latency and things like that? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. So my first answer is we need to optimize the way in which we have current computing capabilities. Typically, and that's what the origin of the cloud is. So the way in which IBM is driving on Watson is on capabilities on the cloud. And it could be the cloud in-house, remotely, in Dubai, outside Dubai. It's more, it depends on the type of questions and the type of applications in which you have Watson for. If it is in medical research, perhaps, inside the healthcare facilities will be a good place, or inside the organization, a university lab is a good place. So it depends of the use case, the particular use case that we are talking about. There is, by the way, it's not just about the moving of data, because when you ask the question, it's the engine that answers and do all the calculations. When you provide the answer, you provide one simple answer, in the way in which I'm talking to you, by the way.
So if you're going to query something from such a supercomputer and it's somewhere in the cloud, what would be the requirement in terms of mobile broadband, LTE, connectivity, latency? Is there specific network requirements that mobile operators, for example, need to consider?
It goes back to, it depends of the specific use case. Let me give you a couple of examples. In research for medical purposes, what we are doing is we are feeding Watson with all information available about medical science that typically are in books, are in digital form, or images. So it depends of where that information is, we feed it. And Watson creates the patterns of knowledge that, as you question and as you are feeding back with the answers, it gives you back. So where that knowledge is, it could be, that's why one of the reasons, because I said it could be at the university if that is the case, or it could be a research center. It's not about moving tremendous amount of data. If the data is already on the web, it can be leveraged on the web. That's why we try to do analytics in place, wherever it resides, not try to put it all in one place.
Sure. So definitely, as you said, investment in big data and all the related technologies of the cloud computing and the networks, they all have to be invested in so we can leverage this. I'd like maybe just to move a subject a little bit towards the people. And I'd like to also just to share a statistic that was given by a reputable advisory company. And I quote them, they said 64% of companies either have implemented big data or thinking about big data or investment in big data in the next 24 months. And they move on to say that 30% have actually have big data initiatives, and out of these, only 25% have actually gone live. So what they are actually trying to say is that only 7.5% have actually have live projects in big data. So, and out of these, we don't actually know how many of them are successful. So it could be around 2 to 3% that actually have successful projects around big data. What are the challenges that face the companies that you work with, the organizations, especially around the people and the skill set? And start.
So let me divide the question in three aspects. You are absolutely right. So the hype of big data is big as big data. And many are the ones that are called, and few the ones that are getting value. Why? My observation is that many of the enterprises and initiatives start with the IT thinking and not with the business question, the business problem. And every time that I talk to business and organizations, government organizations, I start asking with, what is the business problem that we try to address? And then, what is out there, and how can we leverage what is out there to answer and optimize that business problem? So that's one aspect of the question is, why this trend? So whenever you start thinking about big data, you need to think about the governance, but equally important, what are we going to do with it? Is there any business pressure that we have where we can leverage? The second part is about a skill set. And it's not just the technical skill set, but the executive and leadership skill set to demand analytics. Leaders were accustomed to make decisions with this, the guts, right? The feelings that they have about, certain aspects. And it was, most of the time, our leaders have had the experience, 20, 30 years of experience in the field that, we said it's guts, but the reality is, all that engine that prepare them to make those decisions. But how are we infusing analytics in that decision process? Based not in the feelings, but really on the data. So it's a skill set at the leadership level to demand analytics, as well as professionals that are creative enough to leverage analytics.
Sure.
Thank you, Farah. My name is Saeed. I'm with the United Nations in the UAE. First, I would like to thank Mohammed bin Rashid School for organizing this. It's quite informative and timely. Of course, the value of real-time and multidimensional data cannot be overemphasized. And also, it cannot be challenged in terms of its value to business and to governance. But the challenges, my first question is, you are not arguing as a replacement to the traditional means. It's an addition, I believe, because you still need human in sort of in-depth analysis or focused data gathering to make decisions. But this is, I believe, as an addition and a good addition. But what is your experience or views on the quality of data? You referred to that there are systems that can filter, bad data or good data. But we see time and again in politics and elections and companies and businesses that most of the time they get it wrong. The predictions, the polls, the patterns, the technology people. So what is the challenges there, and what are your experiences, and what is your advice to get it right more often?
Well, in the traditional way of data warehousing, the standard answer will be garbage in, garbage out, right? But in the new big data world, I'm going to say that I will not be able to give you 100% precise answer, but sometimes 80%, 70% is good enough to make an accurate decision. Now, I'm not going to say that this is the right approach for an election or life threatened decisions. If you know that this plane has 70% chances to go to the other side, you may not take that plane, right? So it depends on what is the type of decisions that you are for which you are using big data with no high quality. But let me give you an example. In telco, again, not familiar of how the telco rules are in Dubai, but the vast majority of telcos around the world, the only information that they have about me is my SIM card number. However, with that information, they can infer a lot about what I do and how I move.
We have a telco person here.
Oh, sorry. And how I behave. So there are moments in which they don't need to know my name, but they can, with the information that they have about me, they can predict and they can act. So each of my punchline here is, it depends on what is the use case, the business case that you are trying to address, the business problem that you are trying to address. And based on that, quality of data may be mandatory or good enough. 80% is enough for you to support that business answer. You cannot fix data quality in the middle of the process. It is unsustainable. You need to fix data quality at the origin of the process. And sometimes that is not realistic. So you have to play balance in both aspects. But you can definitely do business analysis with data that is not complete. That's the value that we are bringing.
Thank you.
Yes. My name is Umar Shams. Some of the questions that I've got have already been half asked, but I will ask them in a slightly different way. There are many warning labels that come with the concept of big data. These can be things like infringement on privacy of people, quality of data that we've already discussed, cultural differences in a multicultural society, and data falling into the wrong hands. Are there any guidelines that you have in the way of warning labels up front so that people can understand where the pitfalls could be?
Let me understand the question. It's about how to avoid labels. Sorry, I just didn't catch.
What are the potential pitfalls, the areas that people need to be aware of as potential problem areas?
Okay, so the big one that comes to my mind is discrimination. So and this has been a big topic in Canada, for example. The police department are using big data to do profiling. So not because you gather a lot of information about certain either neighborhoods or certain communities, police and defense department should act preemptively in those situations. So those type of things will create, sensitive. And I mention that because it happens around the world. So you have too much information about me that you could even anticipate if I'm, in the brink of committing a crime. Are you going to arrest me just 2 minutes before that or not? What is the freedom piece? So that's the first one that comes to my mind because we are just getting a debate within the last month around that topic in Canada. It happens the same with healthcare procedures, for example. How much information and how much insurance, I'm talking at the level of insurance, how much do they need to know about me to give me the policy? Great that they can optimize that premium. Is it too much? So it's questions that we need to ask as a society, and we are walking this path. We are deciding how are we going to behave, and it includes regulation as well. I hope I answered your question.
So definitely there are challenges around big data. Let me just bring this back to the smart city sort of discussion. And one of the questions that come to mind is that we talked about telecoms, we talked about different organizations, and the fact that it's not just looking at the structured data that we have on transactions, but also looking at different kinds of data outside the organization. And maybe in government and telco, sharing the data, that's what brings to me what is the big data in this scenario. So can you elaborate more about how to utilize this concept in sort of a smart city context?
Well, I think that you are actually ahead of many organizations on that with the mobile city. So being able to leverage, for example, telecom information about our usage and patterns and how we move through the city to be able to optimize traffic patterns. And to be able to, again, it's not traffic patterns for the mass, but being able to identify, components of the city or a group of citizens that move in certain way and optimize the routes, for example, for them. Let's say school buses. Let's say emergency transportation. Another aspect, this is just on the telecom, merging telecom for transportation. But you can also merge telecom with security and safety. How, again, going back to how people move, patterns, transactions that happen, and how to start merging to create, behavioral patterns that allow us to predict, anomalies. It's not about the normal behavior, it's about things that are out of the ordinary that help people to explore. Tourism is another one. So when you start looking at tourism, you will say, well, tourism leaves this amount of data, this amount of money in the city. Are all tourists behave the same? Do all tourists leave the same amount of money? How we optimize and maximize the revenue that each type of tourists leave to the city. Because it's not about knowing that, it's how we optimize them, how we get them. That's what big data and the analysis of all their behavior help us.
Many hands up.
Thank you. When we are talking about smart cities and big data, we are still putting a lot of hypotheses here. You just said there is an example of merging telco with traffic or telco with security. Is there any application that pass your knowledge and your experience wherein everything is merged together? Telco, transportation, health, tourism, government services in one platform, because For us, this is still as a hypothesis, and we want to see a real example that being used, big data in smart cities.
Okay. So, is there one that is merging all? No, it's a root. That's, and I mentioned at the beginning, it's always a challenge because to speak here because you are always at the front end of innovation. Are the organizations and government around the world pushing the envelope to merge both things? Yes. So you will have the example of Rio de Janeiro with the emergency department. Rio de Janeiro problem was that when it's a rain, basically the city paralyzed for 5-7 hours. And it was a big problem for them, not just from a productivity perspective, but also from a safety perspective. So what they did was they created a initiative to how make City de Janeiro smarter around those emergencies and anticipate. It is a rain in certain part of the city. We now know how is it going to affect the rest of the city, and we have the right transport, rerouting of traffic, evacuation, response time, and schools pre-planning, all prepared based on what is happening. And by the way, it's in real time because not all the water moves through the city in the same way every time. So it dynamically redirects and helps city officials to move the people and the emergency department around. So that's one example. No, I'm going to continue. So that is one. Another example is what we have right now in the European countries, in which they allow to have to start looking at telco information, transaction information from telco, to look at patterns of mobility, to optimize what are the typical routes of transit for people and the deviation routes that people follow. That is on transit. We have on healthcare, the biggest case that we have there is around preventing a fraud in healthcare submission for Medicaid, in taxes, in what we call it fee systems, where we know human behavior. When it's money, there is a high chance possibility that is some wrong behavior around it. And now in tax collections or fee collections or claims for Social Security, there are systems that identify patterns and behavior, who knows who and how money moves around, that help us to prevent and reduce that. Cases are in the US particularly, and there is one in the UK, the city there. But mostly City of New York, Commonwealth City, Los Angeles, that have in the tax. So it's each of these use cases that leverage, but not one that has it all.
Okay, I think we'll take the last two questions, one from the front and another one from the back. This
is Colonel Khalid Nasser. I'm General Director of the Smart Services at Dubai Police. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for your excellent presentation. And actually, I do have two questions. The buzz of what we've heard about the big data, I've heard it a long time ago. And still now, the company, they don't know how to start with this kind of project. So what are the steps that you think that, or procedures to accommodate this kind of project? As you know that at Dubai Police, we're gathering a lot of information, a lot of data. The problem is how to send this data to the public, to the companies, they can use it. Sometimes even our manager, they don't trust those data. They say it's not correct. So this kind of issues that still have a problem with. The other question is, do you think big data has an issue with the business side or technology side?
The question
is the problem with the big data, is it a business issue or a technology issue?
So for the first part of the question. Well, I always start with whatever is the business problem. It's not about saying I can apply big data for that. But an example of what we are doing in Toronto with some of the police data is about making citizens aware of what are the statistics per neighborhood, for example, and the typical fraud patterns that happen in the city or in the region. We have examples of how that data is being used by helping citizens to be more aware, and also helping companies identify where to invest or where to put their offices. And it comes back with the question about profiling. You don't want to create, and that was a big debate for us, we don't want to create what we call ghettos. We want to socialize and democratize the growth of the city. So in those areas that had high risk, there are investments, and there are investments not just from additional police there, but also how to recover those parts of the city to make it more livable. So that's one way in which that information helps. From a patterns and behavior, we are applying those patterns and behavior to prevent and anticipate crime. Why or how is by identifying what are the triggers that drive, let's say, crime in certain areas. If some demographics are changing, investment is low, you can identify that, let's say, in 5 years, if these trends continue, this is what is going to happen. So how we need to invest in those areas to make those changes. Those are the kind of things that you could do. Now, the question about, is it big data or is the business? I will always start with the business, because our function is to help business to make more optimal decisions. And what are the tools and the media that we use to help them to make those optimal decisions? It could be big data, it could be a small data, but it's always a start with the business, in my mind. If they don't get the value, we don't get the investment that we need for big data.
Thank you. Last question there.
Hello. My name is Danish Farhan. I work for a consulting firm, Zishi & Co. We work quite closely with Smart Dubai and Dr. Aisha. One of the key stakeholders to make big data successful is obviously individuals. Two parts to this question. Is permission essential from individuals when we're collecting data from them as a government? And second, what's the best framed pitch to the general public so far to say, give us your data willingly, because this is the value that you're going to get from it?
I love that question. So there was a woman in the UK close to a year and a half ago that decided that she wanted to hide her pregnancy from big data. She went to long stints and activities to really, avoid social media, avoid, sending emails through Google, like reduce actually her living just to avoid it. At the end, 7 months, they catch him. So the point that I want to make with this is big data is there. And for the millennial generation, big data is not a big deal. They are accustomed to share all their life facts in Facebook or whatever is the new social media of fashion. They don't have those many constraints about how much I'm going to share or not. It's our generation, the one that has those concerns, right? So you will need to have different strategies. Is the problem that you are trying to fix for the millennial, or the millennial will have a big voice there? You will not have that issue. If it is for, the older generation, you may, and you will need to ask consent. But there is so much data about me, even if I don't want to share it, that it will be hard for me to protest to not, be sharing it. So it's a balance. It depends on how intrusive it is. But, the more millennials grow up and get into the workforce, the less that is going to be a challenge. My observation.
Topic. I think we've been asked to have the one last question there.
Thanks very much. I'm Mohammed Habibur Rahman, a faculty here at the Mohammed bin Rashid School of Government. My question is to do with looking at the interface between public policies and big data, or what you call data analytics. Does it really help government to act proactively in delivering good policies, for example? And if so, what are the kind of examples? The things that are going through my mind when you made your presentation and had this interactive question-answer session is, for example, does it help governments to act quickly on cybersecurity issues, for example, protecting people from all kind of privacy problems? Or to say on a broader issues like bridging the gap between the quality of education and the demands of the industry. Or small issues like patient administration and patient management, those kind of things.
And my perspective is that it makes a lot of sense because it facilitates and accelerates the way in which information is exchanged within the government. Health records is a good example. There are countries that are regulating health records. I don't know what it has and how is, what are the components and what is exchanged and shared, what is private and what could be, collected and even sell to pharmaceutical firms. As long as it's not your name and your particular history, they can only individualize, they can make money on that. Why is that important? Because when you standardize, key, what I call master data of certain subjects, then you can facilitate how that data fluid within the system. So I'm giving you the example of health records. Financial records is another one that, that is also, there is some standardization around governments. Individual records. What means individual records? Is it my name, my gender, my date of birth, where I live, or is just my name and my gender? What are the characteristics of that I can exchange across, the healthcare department, the security department, the police department, the finance department? So when the government needs to put a picture of Olga Parra, 360 view of my life, they can easily put it together because it's a standard across all the entities. It's not about all my data. It's about the data that is key, that makes me as an individual, that can be easily, standardized across the different organizations. So, have the government play an important role here? Absolutely. They can facilitate and build the foundation for something that traditionally in other countries is a nightmare because each of those departments create their own standards and their own records, and for them exchanging information is just a nightmare. Did I answer your question?
Thank you very much. So we've heard a lot today about big data, from its definition to the use cases that we can do. There's definitely from the questions a lot of concern around privacy, questions about how do we actually start with big data, where do we get the data from and how can it be integrated, and the question of can we integrate everything in one place. So there's quite a lot of things that have been discussed today. Thank you very much for your knowledge and information, and thank you all for the attendance. Before we close the session, I would like to thank Mohammed bin Rashid School of Government for hosting this event. I would also like to announce that the next event will be on a very, very interesting subject and relevant to what we are doing, which is the Internet of Things. The invitations will, inshallah, be sent soon. Thank you again for your attendance, and thank you for hospitality. Thanks.